You pay, they spend. £91 billion of your money is simply being given away. How does that make you feel? Why is it happening? And has the government made the right decision? It feels like every week the state grows larger, more powerful, and more expensive, with people like you and I being left to figure out how to protect ourselves financially. Meanwhile, something huge is happening quietly in the background. The first massive domino in what many believe is the start of a global gold shortage could have just fallen, and it could be all driven by the BRICS nations preparing for a gold-backed financial system. So today, we're breaking it all down. The politics, the money, the global shifts, and what it means for you. Before we get into it though, remember, follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts so you never miss another episode. Right, let's get into it. James is back on the podcast today to go through all this with me. James, thanks so much for jumping back on the podcast with me.
Yeah, hi Jake. Thanks for having me again. Always a pleasure.
No
Never
worries.
chill.
Back by popular demand.
Yeah, that's it, mate.
So first question has to be the big one. Are we actually seeing the start of a genuine gold shortage, global gold shortage? Is that a concern of yours?
I mean, honestly, yes. You know, it's starting to look that way. We're not running out of gold, but we're running out of easily available gold. The supply chains have slowed down massively. You know, it's not as easy as getting gold out of the ground, delivering it to people. You know, it's got to be mined, refined, stamped, pressed, insured, delivered. And, you know, central banks are buying everything that they can get their hands on right now.
Yeah.
Mines aren't producing enough. Investors, they're waking up to the fact that the world feels a bit unstable right now.
Yeah, yeah. And how significant is, recently we've seen Indonesia put a new export duty on gold. In the bigger picture, how significant is this move from Indonesia?
Well, I think it's definitely a lot bigger than people think.
Yeah.
You know, Indonesia are a massive, massive producer. And when a country like that says, you know, we're keeping more of our gold at home, you know, it tightens the supply globally.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, this isn't happening in isolation. Other countries around the world are doing the same thing. It's really part of a worldwide trend where producers want more control over their own gold instead of, you know, letting it flow freely into global trade.
Yeah, and this could be the first domino in a sort of global move. BRICS nations probably won't be too soon after following this move. Just before we get into a bit more detail, what are the BRICS nations and why are they so important?
Yeah, great question. So the BRICS is basically a big group of fast-growing countries. So BRICS itself stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And there's essentially a big bunch of countries lining up to join.
Yeah.
So why do they matter? Because together they're a massive chunk of the world's population and resources. So they don't want to rely on the US dollar forever. And they're basically trying to build their own economic system. When big economies look for alternatives, it shakes things up.
Yeah. And are they maybe looking to set the stage for a gold-backed system throughout their network?
Look at what they're doing. They're buying record amounts of gold. I think they are in final stages and talks of doing that. So having a gold-backed ecosystem, essentially.
Yeah.
Building their own like payment systems and settling more trade in their own currency. So it might not be a full gold standard, but it definitely looks like a move towards something gold influenced and something more stable than fiat currency.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that the central banks have been stockpiling gold. We've mentioned this in previous podcasts as well.
Yeah.
What would you say the main reason for them doing this is, and do they know something the public doesn't?
Well, I think you've got to look at the big picture. There's a lot of economic uncertainty, geopolitical tension, and in my eyes, they want to overpower the dollar, become the new powerhouse of the world. And I think they're doing a great job. You know, GDP, they've run past the G7 now. So it's only getting bigger and bigger.
So why is it the best time to buy gold right now?
Well, I think all of the warning signs are flashing. You know, governments are spending too much. Inflation keeps popping up. Central banks are hoarding supply and global tensions are rising. So for a lot of people, it's that economic uncertainty, you know, having something safe to protect you rather than losing out to high inflation, etc. But I think gold has always been the go-to. When people feel unsure about the future, Right now, there's a lot to feel unsure about. People turn to one thing that has always survived every economic mess.
And that's gold.
That's gold.
So let's move on to a little bit more of a budget review from last week.
Yeah, sure.
£91 billion is how much they're increasing welfare spending by. What was your first reaction when you saw this figure from Labour's new policies from the budget?
Well, here we go again.
Yeah.
Not 91 billion is a huge number.
Yeah.
Especially when the country's already dealing with high taxes, high inflation, massive debt. It feels like we're heading in the opposite direction of what the economy really needs.
Yeah. And what direction do you think this signals for how Labour wants to take the country?
Well, I think it tells me they're pushing for a much bigger, more hands-on government. More spending, more redistribution, more state involvement. Whether you think it's a good or bad, it's definitely a shift away from encouraging business growth, personal responsibility.
Yeah, tying into that, what is the incentive now if you are an entrepreneur or you're an investor in the UK? What are the incentives now?
Well, I think they tried to make it a little bit more appetising for non-UK businesses.
Yes.
So I don't know, Jake, to be fair, I don't think it looks good for many people. Average, they mentioned so many times that the working class people, but I think they've gone the other way.
Yeah.
With working class people, I think they've made it a lot more tough.
Really have. Tightening the screws for the 98% in the middle, giving it to the 1% at the bottom. How will all this affect inflation?
Well, I mean, if you spend more money that you don't really have, inflation goes up. It's pretty simple. More government spending usually means more borrowing, and that pushes prices higher because you're pumping extra money into the system without creating extra goods.
Yeah.
So it's not great news for anyone who's trying to keep the bills down.
Speaking of which, what kind of impact do you think this will have on savers and people trying to be financially independent?
Well, again, it's just harder to save. The price of goods, olive oil nowadays, you go and buy a bottle of olive oil, it's like 11 quid.
That's a good one, yeah.
A beer, £7.50 if you work in London. So it just makes it more tough.
So what should someone concerned about wealth preservation do right now?
Well, I think there's other ways you can save your money, right? If you look at ISAs, now you can't keep the whole 20 grand of your tax-free ISA allowance in a cash ISA.
No.
You have to have that money or a portion of that money in stocks or invested.
Yeah.
And I mean, what the average on a stocks and shares ISA 7% a year. I mean, the inflation rate may go up to 4%. True inflation, in my eyes, is closer to 10, north of 10%. So essentially, you've got to keep your money working harder. But what are the options right now? You've got premium bonds, which I don't even think show 3% a year.
No.
Cash ISAs, savings accounts showing less than the rate of inflation.
Yep.
You're forced to look elsewhere. So again, that's why we've had a really busy year, having money pumped into gold, physical assets, silver, platinum, palladium. Even alternatives. People work with whiskey.
Yeah.
Artwork. Different alternatives can get your money working a bit harder.
James, thanks so much for jumping back on the podcast with me today. What are your final thoughts?
Well, I think we've been doing the podcast a while now, and it's nice to share your points on what's happening around the world. So if anybody does want to sit down and have a chat, feel free to give Direct Bullion the office a call. We're more than happy to sit down and answer any of your questions and send you some information.
And if you'd like to get in touch, you can call us on 0800 055 7050, or you can go and get our guide to tax-free gold at guide.directbullion.com. James, super informative again. Thanks so much for getting back on the podcast with me.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. You have a good week too, mate.
Thank you. Cheers, James.
Nice one. Cheers, bye.
With Labour giving away £91 billion of your money and Indonesia's new gold export duty, the world is changing fast. BRICS are quietly stockpiling gold, and the window for UK buyers may be narrowing. So if you're thinking about buying or buying more, it's time to think seriously about your wealth and whether it's protected. Stay informed, stay prepared, and protect your wealth. If you want to understand how gold can protect your wealth in this new environment, make sure to head over to guide.directbullion.com and request your free copy of our guide to tax-free gold. It's packed with insights and information you won't find anywhere else. That's guide.directbullion.com. Take control, get informed, and protect your future before the next wave of changes hits. You won't regret it. Remember, if you're listening on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and that like button. If you're listening on Spotify, please give us a follow. The same with Apple Podcasts. But for now, share this with someone who's on the fence about gold. Comment below and we'll answer your questions in the next podcast. This has been the Bullion Advantage. Thanks so much for listening. The purchase of gold does not constitute an investment or offer financial returns. Gold is considered a store of value and not an investment product. Past performance of gold is not indicative of future performance. Prices and values of precious metals can fluctuate and are influenced by various market factors. Direct Bullion does not provide investment or tax advice and recommends that you conduct your own independent research before making any purchasing decisions.